Welcome back to The Big Question. Let me just reintroduce our guests to you. Mr. Vagish, who joins us from the Hindu Studios, who is the Deputy Editor of the Hindu Business Line. Mr. Abdul Majid, partner with Price Waterhouse. And Mr. Gurjot Pal Singh, who is right here in our studios. He's from thebankbazaar.com. Now, just to come back to you, Mr. Vagish, and starting off with you in this segment, when there are already issues like the NPAs and the NINs already, raging at the banks, is there a visible degree of pressure now on some of these banks with today's development?
Yes, there is that feeling that banks will face some bit of pressure. Usually whenever interest rates start going up and start going up in such a dramatic fashion as has happened over the last 15 or 16 months, usually borrowers tend to face some kind of stress, and banks also have this problem that their non-performing assets tend to go up during this period. So definitely there is the possibility of higher non-performing assets for banks over the next 1 year or so. And as far as NIMs are concerned, again that's another issue where banks will face some difficulty. It's partly because if they actually transmit these hikes to the borrowers, there is definitely the possibility that they could lose a bit of business, which might go to competition, who may not actually immediately transmit the same thing. So that's definitely a pressure from competition. At the same time, banks will also have to increase their deposit rates. If they don't, again they may lose the funds to rival banks. So they're going to face pressure on both sides. So definitely a difficult 1 year ahead for banks.
All right. Now, just to get your expert opinion on this, now analysts, they normally view two situations, that's PSUs versus private and a large cap versus mid cap. Which do you think is the appropriate way of looking at it? Which can really weather the storm? Which would find it difficult?
Actually, banks which have a good what they call CASA, more of current accounts and savings account deposits, which are generally low cost deposits, they should be able to weather this storm better. And sometimes you have banks belonging to both segments. There are some public sector banks which have a very good CASA, like for instance PNB, and even SBI has a very good CASA deposit ratio. Of course, the private banks like HDFC, ICICI, Axis Bank, they are also obvious candidates for doing very well in a situation like this.
All right. Just to come back to you, Mr. Singh, looks like the impact is already seen for Yes Bank. At least it has increased the base rate and the BPLR by 0.5%, a gradual impact there. But how much will my EMI as a customer, how much do you think that will go up by?
Well, if you look at an existing borrower, he has already been affected a lot, and he will be further affected by this rate hike. If you look at someone who had borrowed in 2009 at a floating rate of around 9.25%, he's already paying somewhere around 11.25% already as a interest. So the EMIs of those people have already increased considerably, and they'll further increase early in August. All these customers are going to feel the hit as of now. Depending on the customer, depending on the ratio that EMI has to his income, he may take a call of paying this higher EMI at this point in time, or he may opt for to increase the tenure of the loan, which would in effect decrease his EMI as of now. So that could be a short-term measure for any retail borrower who had bought and whose EMI has increased considerably, which he feels is out of his reach.
All right. Mr. Majid, just to get your point of view in here as well, do you believe that the interest rate cycle will peak out at some point? Is that soon? Is that going to happen soon?
I don't think so. I think it will be there for some more time. I think next 12 months I do see, I think this is going to be in a phenomena, because I don't expect anything to happen dramatically, because as we just spoke, I think inflation is going to be around in that corner. So obviously I think the interest rate is going to go up. I only hope that I think it'll, what we have seen in 10, last about 10 times hike is something, which is out of context kind of thing. But I at the same time want to make it a point here, even not only Indian economy, even if you look at China, which has gone through the same route actually. So I see next 12 months, I don't really see things will settle down. Probably after that we'll have to just see, I think, how things are going to pan out. It's all depend upon the inflation. If it comes below, let's say, the threshold of 6% or 5.5 to 6%, then probably we'll see some sort of relief. Otherwise it will be there for next 12 months or so.
Mr. Vagish, do you share that same point of view? Do you think it's perhaps maybe going to take some more time, or do you see that interest rate cycle peaking out in the near future?
Actually, till about a month ago, we thought there would be probably a single or maybe 2 hikes before the end of this year. And once the repo rate reached 8%, we would have expected the hiking cycle to peak. But right now, it looks, from whatever we have been hearing, it looks like the cycle is not likely to end this year. It may probably extend beyond. The reason is probably that you have oil price hikes that have not still been fully passed on to customers, and worldwide I think commodity prices continue to be quite high, and a lot of things depend on how the monsoon pans out. So we would think that inflation numbers will cross double digits maybe in the next few months, and if that happens, RBI would have no other choice but to again hike once more, or maybe 2 times more. Most estimates right now say that repo rate could probably be around 8.25 or 8.5 by the end of this year. So I would expect some more hikes.
Okay, so some more hikes likely, says Mr. Vagish. Before I start drawing closing comments, Mr. Singh, there are different strategies that money managers, maybe like yourself, advise. Your tips for an average borrower while taking a loan specifically, what would that be?
Well, I believe my advice to any person would differ from his income levels and the amount of loan he is looking at. So any person who is looking out to borrow, or who is already a borrower and is being affected by a higher EMI at this point in time, should take his decision according to his income levels and according to the amount of EMIs that he is paying or he is expected to pay for his loan amounts.
Right.
A new borrower has the option of waiting for a term which he may wait, but which, as our other panelist also said, would not be a short term. So that waiting period would be somewhere to the tune of an year. So if he can wait till that point in time, that is one decision criteria. Otherwise, a person should take his decision very wisely. The EMI to income ratios have to be kept in mind while taking any kind of a decision to borrow at this point in time.
Okay, let me start drawing concluding remarks from Majid. Mr. Majid, first, your final thought. What's the best way? Was this in fact the best way of tackling the inflation scenario that we are in, and what do you think should be the step forward now?
No, as I said, basically in developing economy, I think this is one of the powerful tool, a time-tested tool. I think obviously one of the main concern for these economy like in India is just to make sure the inflation is in control. It's not out of control. The moment the out of control happens, I think these measures have to be kind of taken into account. And looking at, I think, as I said in the beginning, I think economy and the number of people who are below poverty line, what sort of impact it is going to have. So monetary policy is going to play a very key role in the developing economy, not only now, in the future as well. So this is one of the options, which what I think all over the governments, especially developing economies governments, are doing. So I really don't think so something is kind of anything wrong with this. Obviously, I think it has to be taken into account the totality. And I'm a firm believer that Indian economy has a very bright future. See, you go through all these shocks, which is all short-lived. But overall, I think we are going to see the growth trajectory. We are going to see, I think, significant growth in almost all industry, including auto. So there is something medium to long term. I'm not really too much worried on this.
All right, Mr. Vagish, just to get last comments from you, while this is a huge concern for consumers, maybe like you and I, it's also a steep hike, a worry for corporate India as well. Your final thoughts, was this the best way to have dealt with it?
Yeah, I would think it was almost inevitable. From whatever we have heard, a lot of commentators have said this is something they should have done even earlier, probably even in the last time or the previous time. They should have increased it by say 50 basis points as against the kind of baby steps of 25 basis points that they were doing for a long time. So I think there was probably no other alternative. They had to do it, and I agree with what my other panelists said, that this is a short-term issue, and you will have to probably note that RBI has continued to retain its GDP forecast at 8%. It's not revised that this time. So that's still a very good growth figure to have.
All right. Mr. Gurjotpal Singh, one last comment from you. What kind of a situation are we in? Is there a silver lining anywhere in sight?
Well, I would say this was actually inevitable depending on the pressure that was there on the regulator, the pressure that there was on the government. The inflation is actually putting a lot of pressure on these two entities. So it was in a way, inevitable. But I would say for a retail borrower, it's still the retail borrower has a way out, and he may take a short-term solage into the fact that he can increase his tenure. But we see that once inflation is in control within, say, duration of 9 to 15 months, he would be able to borrow at a far more lower rates. So there is nothing to panic. If a person maintains his EMI to income ratio well, he could easily borrow, and he could easily sustain the borrowings.
All right. Thanks very much indeed to all of our guests, Mr. Vagish, Mr. Gurjotpal Singh here in our studios, Mr. Abdul Majid as well, for taking part on the big question tonight. Do let us know what you thought of this discussion. You can always write to us to feedback@ndtv-hindu.com. News and updates will continue right here on NDTV Hindu.